Good afternoon, everybody. This is Steve Brumer from 151 Advisors, and we are happy to get started on this presentation today. We're going to talk about smart cities, the real IoT use cases, and talk about what we see in smart cities world today and what is going on worldwide. Give you some information about the technology that we're seeing happening, give you ideas on where the money is, because as you know, and if you've listened to our webinars in the past, it's all about the commercialization and monetization of your work within these particular areas. So if we look at today, what we're trying to do is there's a lot of problems faced within smart cities and the opportunities, and we know that there's a lot of moving pieces. There's a lot of stuff as related to this smart cities IoT world is not easy. There's a lot of between platforms and products and services that are going on. There's a lot of things that are happening. So today we're going to be talking a lot about real world applications. You know, where is the money and products and services that are being provided? What is the true meaning of ROI in the smart cities and smart building space? And your takeaways from this are going to be around where's the focus on, you know, where should we focus our time and our energy and our efforts within the space, and how can we possibly drive revenue when it's all, you know, through the whole program. I am pleased and happy to have Steve Wimsatt from the Senior Director of Alliances and Business Development at Ruckus Wireless, which is now a division of ARRIS, joining us on the call today. I met him at a recent event, and we hit it off as far as being able to talk about smart cities and what Ruckus is doing in the program. So, Steve, introduce yourself.
Good morning. This is Steve Wimsatt. I'm, as Steve says, I'm with Ruckus Networks, and my background here is I've spent the last couple years with Ruckus working on alliances and ecosystem relationships in the smart city space, and also working with cities and service providers who are seeking to serve cities to understand business models, opportunities, and today I'm going to introduce some new capabilities from Ruckus, as well as highlight some of the interesting applications that we've seen in smart cities.
Excellent. And yes, audience, you have the Steve Squared show here today. So, you know, we're going to be just calling each other Steve as we go through today. And as many of you who have been at our webinars and seminars and have been in our events, you know that I'm a very audience participation focused person. And so Steve and I will be bantering back and forth during the presentations as we go through. We are planning on trying to get this thing done within a 45-minute or so time frame, even though we have an hour set aside, so we can go through and get to that. You do have the ability to ask us questions, so we are on the system that allows us to be able to look at your questions, and we can answer them during it or at the end. There will be multiple audience participation voting polls as we go through it as well. And the presentation will be available for everybody as a PDF file to download after the event is over. So you'll be able to go from there. So we're going to start off with the first audience participation poll. This is a poll that's saying, what is your current role at your company? So I am going to hit start voting, and you guys can vote right now to tell us who you are. And so we can hopefully be able to cater to your particular area of needs, and we can be able to look at who you are and understand a little bit more about where you fit into the role. So as we see, it looks like today it's 100% in executive management. You know, I don't think, Steve, we could ever get that lucky if you have all executives join us for these things. So here we go. All right, so I'm going to start off. 151 Advisors is just to give you a background on us. We are an international strategy company. We help companies with their monetization, commercialization programs. Our expertise is helping establish new markets for your products and services by growing your commercialization opportunities and potential around the world. We've been doing this a long time. We have a tremendous amount of experience. And if you can tell, if we look at some of the companies that we've worked with, our global reach has been fantastic, and we've been very lucky to be able to deal with some great clients who have given us a lot of opportunities to show what our capabilities are. So let's talk about smart cities. So where are the opportunities within smart cities and for IoT? One great thing about this section of the world is that there are everything from parking to digital signage to smart cars to garbage pickups and street lighting, environmental programs, weather metering, trash cans on the street. There are so many opportunities within IoT and smart cities. I had the fortunate time of sitting down with a couple of the tier 1 carriers over the last month or so and talking about where they see the marketplace going. And we're really happy to see that all these guys are having partnership programs in place to be able to look at saying, okay, where can we partner together and where can we play with our partnerships. So if we look at some stats, these are the latest stats for 2018 on where we're seeing IoT units installed within the smart cities markets. And as you can imagine, smart homes and smart commercial buildings lead the pack significantly with the amount of installed units. And as we all know, the smart home business is growing rapidly. It is still a DIY program, but we're seeing a lot of utilities as well as co-ops adding a lot more of their product offering, doing billing within their utility bills into the smart homes as well and smart commercial buildings. Transport, utilities, public safety, public services as well in the growth area for 2018. Can't wait to see what the final numbers were. So if we look at smart parking as being one of the largest growth areas, there's about 1 billion parking spaces in the U.S., and the growth in numbers and putting that as a total parking solution, the integration of the parking sensors that are going to be put in the street, the low-power wide area connectivity options, the idea that these parking sensors are now with LoRa or low power lasting 10 years for battery life. There's a lot of companies that have established themselves within this market, and it surely shows ROI. There's many opportunities for you to be able to look at smart parking and saying, okay, I can do a lot with it. Smart streets and street lights continues to be a huge growth area. We're seeing a lot of cities being able to move to LED light bulbs and adding 4G onto their program, but their ROI is so different. If you look at LA, they got a 63% savings, but most of that was in energy, as well as with the Chicago Department of Transportation, which was an increase in efficiency also. But then you have the city of San Francisco that put the smart parking program together with smart streets, and they reduced their carbon footprint by 25% in deploying that, because you didn't have to drive around the city of San Francisco trying to find a parking space if you use their Park Smart application. So we're seeing a lot of return on investment. We're seeing a lot in growth. And if those numbers are correct, and we're looking at $359 million by 2026, there's a lot of opportunities to be able to provide to cities those kinds of programs. Environmental monitoring, as we continue to look at this area, we're seeing a lot of people deploying in certain particular geographic areas around the world smart monitoring of their environment. So, for example, you're seeing a lot of tornado warning systems that are being put out with sensors in the Midwest in the United States, whereas in the city of Taipei in Taiwan and Singapore, there's tsunami warnings as well as typhoon warning systems that are being put into the cities to help the citizens with their application know what's going on within those environments. And so that is a huge growth area today for those cities. And low power, wide area connectivity with LoRa-based products are ways of being able to get those systems out and deployed in a very short and fast period of time. So if we look at waste management within smart cities, there's a huge amount of growth here. The idea that looking at the large increase in billions of pounds and tonnage of waste, and you look at the industry itself growing rapidly from 57 million in 2016 to 223 million in 2025, something has to be done with the calculation around it. Just in my neighborhood, you look at the waste that goes on. We're putting one bag of garbage into a bin. Wires are not a way of being able to notify these companies that they don't have to pick up. Same thing within the cities. But there has been a lot of failures in this area. The city of Philadelphia had a program, but their bins were destroyed by the public. They had 2G modules in them. It wasn't until it was evaluated that they realized that all the systems had been shut down when 2G was shuttered by their carrier. So there's a lot of programs that are there. And then one of the biggest ones was Barcelona. And if any of you in the audience have been to Barcelona for Mobile World Congress or any of the other IoT events, you know that all those garbage bins on the streets are monitored, and they're monitored with through the city to be able to say, okay, well, this one is at this level and I can pick it up there. That city did not necessarily eliminate trucks, but were driven more efficiently through the city. Thus, the ROI was done through that model, not necessarily eliminating people or trucks. One of the big growth areas within smart cities is advertising and the whole idea of mobile advertising as it relates to getting information out. One personal story, in the city of Taipei in Taiwan, the person in charge of the smart city deployment was ordered by the government of the city that they had to find a way to be able to pay for all their smart cities programs that they were doing, so it had to break even. They ended up putting together a mobile advertising application off of the citizens-based app program, that a citizens-based app that everybody had on their handheld for the smart cities information, whether it was parking or transportation or environmental warnings. And through that advertising, they were able to generate enough revenue to pay for their smart cities deployment. So we were seeing a lot more with digital signage, information kiosks, and video boards. In China, you'll see that the smart lighting systems have digital signage on them, as well as EV charging systems. So there's multiple models of being able to use advertising as well as being able to transfer events through the smart light pole, which is a huge growth area. When we look at smart buildings, this is one that I think is going to be a huge growth area for all of us. When we look at increasing the building systems and the technology around buildings and the products that go into it and the controls that are there, it is not necessarily only for savings of energy. We're looking at fire and security property management. There's a huge IoT-based insurance program going on this week out in California that's focused around commercial buildings, and that growth is going to include not only the idea of what it can do for the real estate owners or the companies that own the buildings, but also for the people that are living in there. And as long as we continue to have live, work, play, complex and micro cities, whether they be people that are opening up retail or office space within those buildings, as well as tenants and who are on the commercial side, as well as residents, the idea of being able to look at performance building systems and being able to mold all that technology around in order to give people control over their smart building is incredibly important. Steve, do you have anything to add on any of this at this point?
No, I really think you've got a nice summary of some of the key use cases. I would say something like a smart building, that sector of IoT is probably a bigger market today primarily because it's indoor and it's much easier to deploy those networks. People understand the solutions. When you start talking about some of the smart city applications, we're definitely seeing proven use cases that have been deployed by cities and delivering real benefits, but those have not been rolled out quite as broadly yet, just because it's hard to deploy outdoor networks, and you have to think about how do you ensure that all these sensors are going to have a 5 or 10-year lifespan before you have to go touch them.
Yeah, and it's interesting on the smart building side as a huge growth area. We divide them up into two different particular areas. One is retrofitted buildings as well, and then new buildings. And as you know, new buildings through engineering, architectural design firms, we're looking at being able to look at putting in technology that is going to be there built 3 to 5 years out when the building is completed, but buildings that have to last 30, 40, 50 years. And what do we know what technology in the IoT space is going to look like 30 years from now, 50 years from now, let alone operation from a power consumption standpoint. We can't put necessarily batteries that are going to be in IoT sensors into some of these buildings and expect them to, they're going to last 10 years, as we now know our current level of battery technology. So what do we have to do? All of our IoT products and sensors need to be connected to regular AC/DC power in order to be able to do it. So there's a lot of these kinds of topics that have to get discussed when we're looking at retrofitting new buildings and retrofitting old buildings. So as we go further, we wanted to put an ecosystem slide together, and hopefully everybody can see it. One of the biggest key here for us is that it takes influencers, partners, and everybody along this ecosystem to create a smart building. It is not an easy task. If you look at what we have going on today between companies like Siemens and Honeywell, then you look at what carriers are doing today in smart buildings like an AT&T, and then you look at everything that Steve is doing at Ruckus, as well as all the software companies and sensor companies, and even a current client of ours, Dow DuPont. There's a lot of things that are happening within smart cities and smart buildings that are getting integrated with all of these different tasks and project work that has to get done to do it. Steve, in what you guys have been doing with Ruckus, how are you handling all these areas and all these different groups within the ecosystem?
Great question, Steve. Honestly, from a Ruckus Networks perspective, and I'll introduce the company in a few minutes, but we're basically an infrastructure provider. So if you look at the ecosystem and if you look at like a typical deployment, there's sensors, devices that are collecting data or performing tasks as part of IoT. Those are always connected. There's some form of a network. Then there's management for all these devices, and then there's these applications. Ruckus has integrated the networking and the management for all the different IoT protocols, for BLE, for Zigbee, for LoRa, for Wi-Fi, Ethernet, and we make it much easier to support and manage just a wide range of these solutions. So our role, we're working with the solutions providers and making sure that all those solutions can run easily over a single integrated infrastructure. And we think, and we get a lot of feedback from customers that say, well, when we're trying to understand new use cases, we've got to pilot these things, and often the most difficult challenge, or what takes the most time, is like getting a pilot deployed, and how do you connect all these things. But if it's easy to deploy that network, then you can pilot new use cases much more rapidly, understand what works, understand what are the challenges to really deploy it at scale, and be able to move forward much more quickly and confidently with your ultimate set of solutions and applications.
Steve, you brought up a great point about pilots, and proof of concepts. Are you seeing that every one of your smart cities deployments are going through the POC process first?
I think that's the general consensus. McKinsey issued a very large-scale study back in June where they did a survey of, what's going on in smart cities. There's all this noise. Is it just hype? Is it real? And what they concluded is there's been an awful lot of pilots, of tests, of proof of concepts, and we are seeing real results. There's very, very significant impacts to cities, but their conclusion is we're at the very, very early stages because there aren't that many cities that have rolled this out. I talked to a large Canadian city just last week, and they've had great success on some pilots, but they still haven't rolled anything out yet. And the reason is that they found that the largest operating cost, the largest OpEx component, is the actual deployment of sensors. And I'm talking about outdoor citywide use cases. So they're really focused on design. Now they understand the needed functionality. They need to design something that they can put out in the field and will literally last at least 5 years before they have to touch it again. If they have to go out and replace a sensor after 12 months, their ROI, gets tanked. But if they can put something out there and have it just report back what it needs to report back, for 5 years or even 10 years, then there's a lot of very, very attractive use cases. So I think most cities are actively trying things, understanding it. There's some larger scale concerns that are going to have to get worked out before they do the full deployment.
Yeah, I would agree with you, and we're finding cities that are getting funded for trials, but the trials are usually like one market or one vertical or one segment of the total deployment, and sometimes the ROI isn't shown immediately, and so a lot of these cities are tentative to roll out and spend the full amount of money to put a smart cities implementation plan together. Somehow that's got to get changed. So I wanted to get into a couple of different use cases now. This is a very popular one that's been around. So hopefully this will be something new for you guys. But Microsoft Campus has done a great pilot testing. It's been going on for several years where they're providing an analytical layer over their existing building management system in 13 different buildings across its campus. A lot of the stuff has been done around fault detection and diagnosis using Azure as their platform. This has saved them a ton of money from an energy standpoint, but more importantly, it's been the energy management piece that through the analytics that they have got, the Microsoft company and engineers have been able to optimize the building's power needs and lower its overall consumption, as well as have more efficiency in its usage of power on its campus. The alarm management piece has been amazing in the sense that it's being able to look at all the employees on campus, where are they, since it is an open campus, being able to track people to be able to understand where they are within those campuses, as well as alarm monitoring for anything that may be going wrong within that campus and being able to get everybody aware of where the danger may be. So I think that's a growing area within the space. Near and dear to our hearts here in Atlanta, the Atlanta Smart Corridor project has been going on, and it's on North Avenue downtown. And this was done as a cooperative program between Georgia Tech, AT&T, the City of Atlanta, the State of Georgia, Economic Development, the IoT ATL group that I'm the executive board of, and many other companies that have been able to look at being able to put 100 IoT different sensors on the North Avenue corridor it's an 18 intersection corridor, and it's been used to do the following. Not only is it for traffic censoring that's directly tied to the signal lights to be able to flow the traffic across North Avenue, but it also has a program that has been able to generate a way for to know if there's a public safety vehicle, police car, or EMS ambulance that is on North Avenue, and being able to judge the lights and change the lights to be able to have that emergency vehicle flow faster down North Avenue. The data generated has helped many companies within our IoT Atlanta community to be able to look at it and help them build better applications and better products. So it is a public-private program that has been extremely successful in being able to show to the city of Atlanta what smart city IoT sensor systems can do for traffic and street systems. It's also tied to lights and cameras. One of the biggest growth areas in the world for smart cities has been India. The government has earmarked a lot of money, $15 billion minimal, to be able to develop over 100 smart cities and rejuvenate 500 more. It's interesting when government gets involved in being able to sign the check, how easy it is for the cities to find ways to be able to spend that money. For those of us in the U.S. markets, it's not as easy to do, but there is opportunities for us to look at how can the federal government be able to provide us with the information, especially when it looks like, when we look at our transportation systems that are owned by the federal government, as well as the highway system. God only knows we need to have better ways to be able to control the traffic situation that is, that is painful for many of us around the country. India is being able to control that, as well as the public transportation programs, street lights. They're looking at parking programs. They're definitely looking at environmental monitoring programs, all with great potential impact for the citizens in those particular cities. There was a Smart Cities Challenge that was involved, and so that is a great way for us to be able to look at this use case and be able to utilize it in the areas that we are heavily involved in. So as I draw conclusions, how do we get smart city ready? One of the biggest things is we have to build an environment. The environment's here within our cities. We know that our cities could utilize our technology of IoT and what our companies provide them. The services that we could provide with a digital city to the citizens is amazing. When we look at everybody from school-age children to our senior citizens, being able to monitor them, look at their activities, and being able to provide value-added services, which is what our governments in our cities should be able to do. The idea of reducing energy, it's just not all about replacing street lights with LED. It's now what can those street lights also provide from a connectivity standpoint, and what other additional applications can we look at. Health and Human Services, being able to provide for citizens more information about health services that are available for them, and being able to link people to those services through technology. Mobility and logistics, being able to look at where vehicles within the cities can go and how they can help us, whether it is transportation department groups, as well as energy, public works, water, sewer system company groups, and garbage and support services. Public safety, the idea of what we can do with police, fire, EMS, and the control of that, what's being done today in fire prevention programs and interface between buildings and fire captains and dispatchers, and being able to monitor that's an unbelievable added value to a smart city. The telecommunication programs that are going on, and being able to have that systems upgraded, and being able to look at what we can do for helping citizens. We've talked about waste management and water and energy conservation within those smart cities. So tremendous opportunity within smart cities to be able to grow and be a part of it and understand where there is money-making opportunities. And so as we go into that, I'm going to throw out the second poll for our voting, and it is, where do you see the largest money-making opportunities in smart cities? Of all the people that are on the call, I did look at the names and information of the people that pre-registered for this webinar. I know a lot of us are in the industry already, and those of you that are new to the industry, I wanted to ask this question because I want to understand where you see the money-making opportunities out there. So is it in smart homes? Is it in smart commercial buildings, transportation, or in the utilities area? So the poll is open. Please vote if you get a chance. That would be great to be able to look at where you see the overall opportunities for us. Okay, so as we get the answers here, let's go to the next portion of this. And Steve, it's your turn to get into what Ruckus is doing with smart and connected cities.
Fantastic. Thanks, Steve. Let me do a quick introduction to Ruckus, and then I'm going to just sort of follow Steve's pattern and talk about some additional IoT use cases that should be considered. So Ruckus we're part of ARRIS Networks, and we are an edge networking providers. We provide Wi-Fi, wireless, wired networking, and now we support IoT. Really our core competency has always been superior wireless performance. We've got some patented antenna technology, so the Wi-Fi performs better, has a little better coverage, a little better reach. And if you think about cities in particular, it's challenging to put in outdoor networks. So it's a sweet spot for Ruckus, where if you have a better access point, better Wi-Fi, it's much easier to deploy and support these deployments. We're #1 market share worldwide for service provider Wi-Fi, and a lot of the service providers have been deploying our Wi-Fi into cities. As you can see here, the Link New York City, which are essentially digital kiosks that are going up through all 5 boroughs of New York, replacing phone booths, they all feature Ruckus Wi-Fi, and they typically are being reported as delivering greater than 250 megabit speeds. Even in places like Times Square, where there's a very, very challenging wireless environment. But we have a number of very large city deployments in Shanghai, Hong Kong, Paris. But it's not just large cities. We also do small cities. What's interesting about this whole smart city space, honestly, is there's a lot of publicity, a lot of visibility on some of the larger cities that are really doing some pretty innovative things. But the demand, the opportunity is just as great for smaller towns. And in many cases, smaller cities and towns are able to move more quickly on some specific solutions. There's fewer stakeholders. So we think there's opportunities in all these markets. Ruckus. One other comment on Ruckus is we've recently launched, and this is shipping now, it's available, a line of CIVRS products. And CIVRS is Citizens Broadband Radio Service. Essentially, it's a private LTE solution that is a little different. It's priced more like Wi-Fi. It deploys as easily as Wi-Fi, and it's all based on a new spectrum that's been made available in the U.S. by the FCC. There's 15 10 megahertz channels in the 3.5 gigahertz band. Steve, did you have something?
No, I'm just listening. Yeah.
Okay. And 8 of these are general authorized access, so they're entirely free. So today, traditionally, if you wanted to do anything over LTE, someone had to own spectrum, which was auctioned off in very large territories, so only mobile operators would have it. But under CBRS, an individual factory, a hotel, a hospital, a town, they can simply go to a database, provide the coordinates of where they want to deploy their CIVRS network, and there's 8 channels that can be available at no charge at all. You can reserve up to 4 of these. It's all done through a database, and you literally reserve it for the footprint of the area that you're trying to serve. This allows a whole, we think this is going to unleash a lot of new innovation where people can deploy these private LTE networks. In the case of a smart city, cities can deploy a citywide network for their own operational purposes or for Internet of Things opportunities. They could put out a neutral host LTE network. If you're a smaller town and you're not being well served by mobile operators, you can put in your own LTE network and then connect in the cloud to the 4 main mobile operators in the U.S. There's a whole range of applications. We think CBRS will also create a new range of industrial IoT solutions where for the first time you get the predictability, the service quality of LTE, and you can manage it yourself inside a factory, inside your facility, and that opens the door to a number of new applications. So we think that's going to be something you're going to hear a lot about, and we're developing new solutions with partners as we speak. So when we look at IoT, and Steve emphasized many of these same points, there is some key markets where it seems to be really growing rapidly. Smart buildings, probably the biggest opportunity today, the most mature, although still very much in the early stages. This is things like the smart lighting, smart temperature controls, smart door locks. Smart industry, another huge opportunity where you're automating factory floors, automating warehouses. Smart cities we're going to talk about. And smart homes, honestly, when you start talking about the Google Home, Amazon, Alexa, there's a huge amount of innovation there. I've got an interesting case study I'll talk about where a lot of these solutions have been integrated together into a really unique home-based opportunity. But when you talk about
Steve,
yeah.
It's interesting because when I asked the question about the largest money-making opportunities in smart cities, smart homes got no votes. Yep, not one. So it was almost an even.
Depends on who's making the money. I mean, there might be a different set of players making money in the home than, say, from a utility meter reading network. But
right.
But if we're calling it IoT, I mean that's a huge market, and people are going to. I think that there's going to be a lot of opportunity there.
Agreed.
So all these IoT solutions require networking. They all have to be linked together. I'm hoping I have a build here. Oh, there you go. So what Ruckus provides is we're the infrastructure layer, and if you think about, there might be. In a smart building scenario, there's thermostats, there's lighting, there's doorknobs, there's, an automated mini bar in a hotel, whatever it might be. There's a lot of these applications. They get linked together. You have to manage all those sensors, make sure the batteries are still good, when is the time to replace them. And then you have to take all that IoT sensor data and route it to the appropriate application, which is typically in the cloud or somewhere, somewhere in the data center. We provide a complete solution for linking for connecting your IoT devices and for managing all that. So here's our total IoT access network solution. If you look up in the upper left-hand corner, the IoT ready access points, all Ruckus access points have exposed USB ports, so both the indoor and the outdoor APs. So if you have a Wi-Fi deployment, which most hotels have, cities have in many cases, Wi-Fi is pretty much everywhere. You can very easily just plug in BLE or Zigbee or LoRa, whatever IoT solution you need, and power that up and use the exact same network to connect all those devices. So you don't need to deploy a full secondary or tertiary network. Not a lot of redundant overlapping networks. Just use one network for all your networking requirements. So far, we have IoT modules that support BLE and Zigbee. We're working on the LoRa now. But instead of having to fully deploy a network, say in a hotel or in an apartment complex for door locks or thermostat, temperature controls, you can simply plug in these modules, connect all these things, and you save 60 to 70% on the deployment cost. Our wireless LAN controller supports identifying which access points have IoT gateways and opening, allowing the security to have those gateways transport data back. And then we have an IoT controller which provides complete management and some decision making for the specific IoT gateways and the devices. So we make it much easier to deploy and manage an IoT network at scale. Here's another picture of it. You can see an access point there in the middle, and it's just a plug-in dongle there. And the way we have it architected, we're not tied into a single IoT networking capability, and you're probably seeing the alphabet soup. There's Z-Wave, there's Thread, Sigfox. There's a lot of different solutions. There's short range and long range wireless solutions. Any of those can be plugged into the access point, and this way you're leveraging a single network infrastructure. And at the IoT controller, you can apply local policy rules just on the IoT controller, or in many cases embedding third-party SDKs. So you can put the edge analytics, the edge processing capabilities right there on the wireless network to enable complete functionality at the edge. So let me talk a little bit about some of the solutions that we've seen out there and the benefits of these. And you just heard from Steve, we got parking, we've got street lights, environmental sensors, and clearly there's a very wide range of solutions. This one is water meter, so automated meter reading. Town of Laredo, Texas, really a fast-growing town, around 250,000 people, but this is an oil country. So what's happening here is, on the one hand, the town is growing very rapidly, because at least until recently, the oil industry was doing really well, but people were leaving the water company to go get much higher paying jobs in the oil industry. So they had this issue where they had to read more meters and they had fewer people to do it. And they finally decided to put in an automated meter reading system. And in this case, they used LoRa to connect. And LoRa, short for long range, it's a very low power, low bandwidth. It's only 300 or so kilobits maximum performance. But it has a long range. If you put it up on a tower, it can reach a coverage radius of 10 kilometers. And it's very, very low cost. But they were able to put in 65,000 automated meters. And instead of now having staff walk around and once a month read the meters, they can get hourly reads. They can understand what's going on in their network. And the predictable benefit, which they did get, is really reduces the cost of reading the meters. But what they found is there's some secondary benefits that might be even more important. One issue they've got is you have a water leak. Someone might not be aware of it and get a bill a month later for this 20 times more than they were expecting. Then there's a big customer satisfaction issue. People are upset. Often the utility can't collect that money. But with automated meter reading, they can tell within a day or so that there's a very unusual usage pattern. They can call the customer, say, hey, are you really using this much water, or is there a leak or something? And they can stop these things before they become big problems. And certainly in much of the western United States, there's a drought condition. Because of this system in Laredo, they're able to reduce their non-revenue water, which is basically leakage, from 28% down to 10%. So that plus all the direct savings is a pretty big deal. This is a use case, and I put this in because it's not a traditional city use case that you hear about, like the street lights and the parking and the meter reading.
Well, it depends on what city you're in, Steve.
It depends. But I wanted to highlight that there's also a lot of private sector use cases that can be enabled if there's a citywide network. This case, the rat trap, hasn't changed in 100 years. Everyone sees these; they're the same worldwide. But that company, Victor, actually came out with a LoRa-powered rat trap a few years ago. And it's pretty interesting. If you think about every town has these pest control services, and they're ubiquitous. You see the little traps outside of businesses, outside of restaurants, and someone has to drive a route and check all those traps once a week. That's how it's been done. But if you have a LoRa-powered trap, you only need to go visit the traps that have actually been set. So and this is similar to the waste management example, you reduce your cost of checking all the traps dramatically. But B, and the secondary benefit is you don't leave dead rodents sitting in these traps for 6 or 7 days before someone comes and picks them up. As soon as it's been trapped, someone knows about it and they can get there within a day or so. So there's less disease, just less mess from all these rats. It's actually a much better service level to the customers. So that's sort of a new use case you could try. Similarly, and this is another commercial one, this is commuter papers. This is using a simple sensor, it's a photo sensor that measures how much space is left in the bin. Same sensor could monitor fuel levels in a tank or water levels in a tank, things like that. But in this case, this is a company, this is actually in Switzerland. They put sensors in these little bins where they hand out free newspapers. And they initially just wanted to make sure the newspaper people were filling the boxes on time. This is a commuter paper. The target audience was the commuters getting on a train. They wanted to make sure that the paper boxes were getting filled by 6 a.m. And they were able to do that. Very simple. It's like a $10 sensor they put in there. But then what they also were able to understand, they hadn't been thinking about this up front, is they could tell when the papers ran out. So if the papers ran out at 8 a.m., they were missing an opportunity. They needed to put more papers in that box because there were a lot of commuters, their target audience, that didn't get papers. But if the papers were running out at noon or 3 in the afternoon, they didn't need to put nearly as many papers there because they were going to the wrong people anyway. So they could not only track their paper delivery people, but they could fine-tune how many papers they deliver, and they could also demonstrate to their advertisers that the papers were going to the target audience of commuters, and they could earn more revenue for each paper. So it had these another revenue benefit. Last case I'm going to talk about, and this is the home use case, and again there's a lot of things going on, but we work with mostly with Lennar Homes to develop something that there's now something called the Wi-Fi certified home. And essentially, when you look at these developers putting in, this is for new development. If you're putting in a large new development, you can do a full professional site survey of that home design, understand where you need to put access points to get full, great coverage, and you can get that certified, and it becomes a sales feature when you're marketing a new development, because these are all Wi-Fi certified homes. Lennar has taken this and really run with it. They've worked with a number of companies. You can see Amazon, Honeywell, Kwikset, and in this case, this is all managed via Amazon Alexa, so it's all voice controlled. But now they've got a Wi-Fi certified home with a complete pre-integrated IoT platform, and this comes with white glove service. They get it all set up for you. But if you think about it, most homeowners are going to buy all these things individually anyway. Lennar just puts it all in there up front and makes sure it all works. And they've turned it into something that really differentiates their housing from everyone else's housing development. So this is something we think we're going to see a lot more of, where you're just going to move into homes that are fully IoT ready. So again, lots of opportunities, lots of ways to make money in the IoT space. And the Ruckus play is we provide the infrastructure to connect all these devices and to be able to manage large-scale deployments.
Excellent. Steve, I've got a couple questions for you. One is, with your ownership being ARRIS, and them being one of the largest cable set-top box companies in the world, where do you see that correlation happening for smart buildings and smart homes with your products?
Oh, so some of that is a work in process. ARRIS, as the leading provider of set-top boxes, in a great position to integrate IoT capabilities there. In most cases, that's something they work on directly with their large service provider customers. But certainly from a smart building perspective, Ruckus is #1 market share in hotels worldwide. And there's no measurements, but we think we're also #1 in apartments, student housing, similar places where you put in bulk Wi-Fi. And we're leveraging that market position to, we have a lot of ecosystem partners such as people like Assa Abloy in the door locks, Contact.io for BLE asset tracking and engagement. So we think we're in a great position to roll this stuff out worldwide.
Excellent.
I see a question from the audience. It says, in the proposed architecture, much of it is, we talk about gathering sensor data, but where is it analyzed and acted upon? Two answers to that. First of all, it's all a function of wherever the customer wants it to be analyzed. The feature of the architecture is it has complete end-to-end security. LoRa has great security built in. We have great security built into our Wi-Fi infrastructure, so we can securely route the data to wherever the application or the application platform might be. We do have the ability to look at the data. If the customer chooses to configure the network this way, they can look at the data at the edge and make some very quick decisions. And it's not a full, high-end decisioning platform. That would support the application layer. But you can act on some things at the edge, but mostly we would securely route the data to one or more application servers, either in the cloud or in a data center somewhere.
It is amazing how important that data is, and how it's the value of who owns that data has been questioned in smart cities. Because if I have it in my home, if I have my meter, if I have my building, if I am on the public streets that I paid for, who owns that data, and who's going to be able to give it to the people out there. So it's amazing that we look at data and saying, yes, it can be analyzed, it could be used by a lot of different people, but how can we look at the value of it and who's willing to pay for it? We look at data today and saying, okay, well, overall, we look at being able to say, all right, well, if I have the data, who's going to buy it, and what are they going to do with that data, and is it public data because it's coming from a public city? And so there's a lot of ideas of saying who's going to use it and what the value of that data is overall. So last question on the voting. Who should pay for smart cities projects? If we look at, is it a public-private partnership that we see all around the world? Are we looking at taxpayers and the citizens being able to foot the bill for deploying of smart cities? Should we sell the data? How much is that data worth, and who's willing to buy it? And can cities be in the business of selling their data? Or is it just the ROI generated from smart cities and the services that are being provided? So that's our final poll question of this program. As we can start to conclude this, Steve, give us some words of wisdom. What are you seeing out there for 2019 and beyond? If you were listening to us speak on the other end, what would you tell them to say? 2019 is going to be a great year for smart cities because of what, or I should be involved in what part of smart cities?
I think a couple things, and again, I'm from the network, the infrastructure side. I think there has been some confusion over how do you connect all these things, and I think it's very clear. And I've talked about LoRa on this call. LoRa is an unlicensed, very low-cost, long-range networking solution, and it's good for devices, applications that need very little data. The other option, which is also very good, is NB-IoT. NB-IoT runs over over an LTE network. Mostly today those are all licensed, and that's going to be offered by mobile operators. But I think the confusion is gone. People know if you're going to be working with a mobile operator, you have an NB-IoT solution. If you want to control the end-to-end solution, or if there isn't a mobile operator offering NB-IoT, you have LoRa. So that point of confusion is gone. I think we're going to see more and more rollouts. I think the momentum is building. Probably smart cities was a hype cycle, certainly a couple years ago. We get that, but I think it's very real now and is in the agendas of mayors and city council people everywhere. There's pressure to move forward on this. And I'd like to comment on this. Now we've had the voting open for a few minutes. My answer on who should pay for it is probably all of the above. I think public-private partnerships are great. They seem to be most relevant for very large cities. And very large, essentially a public-private partnership works out to be a trade. The city will provide access rights, will provide, help people deploy networks, in their cities. In return, they will ask, a private operator to offer, say, free public Wi-Fi or connect their IoT. That's great. Smaller towns don't expect those to work, and they seem to be much more willing to pay for things. So we see a very clear distinction there. And in terms of ROI generated from city services, there's ROI, there's different forms of ROI, but I think most of these things over time have very, very strong paybacks. The question is, how do you get started? Who puts the money up front? And cities, I believe, are beginning to step up and do that.
And a great conclusion comment, Steve. And I'm going to add to that. We are doing just an okay job of educating the decision makers in these cities. We seem to be wanting to sell them something, but not necessarily explaining well what the advantage of deploying in a smart city could benefit them. I'll go back to the adage is, can you as a mayor and a city council be reelected putting money into a smart city? It seems to be the only thing they really care about most of the time. So the education level has to be there to be able to control that. In addition, the systems integration capability. Who is going to be the company or the group or the IT department that's going to be solely responsible for putting the entire project on its shoulders and seeing it to fruition and getting it all integrated with all of the different partners that are needed to be able to roll this out. So I think that is going to be a big issue that has to be addressed. But I do agree. I think citizens now are demanding that the cities come up with really smart, intelligent options for them to be able to utilize the technology that's available today. So with that in mind, Steve, I want to thank you very, very much for your participation in this webinar on smart cities. Everybody, you've seen our contact information. Please feel free to reach out to either one of the Steves or both of us for anything that you would like to talk about. I'm headed to California to the IoT Tech World show this week out in Santa Clara. So if you're going out that way, please stop by. I'll be chairman of the day at the Innovation IoT sessions on Thursday. Steve, again, thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right, so thanks everybody. 60 minutes on the nose. We kept on time. Have a great day, and hope everybody had a great holiday week last week. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.